All right, we're live. Katie made it. Hi, everybody. Nice to see some familiar names in there. Hi, Amy. I've seen a lot of familiar faces. That's amazing. The PDF is all the way up at the top of the chat. I am going to try to remember to put it in the middle and then at the end. Do make sure if you're here for the CEU, I'm going to put it up right now. Don't fill it out until the end, or about 50 minutes in, and then definitely make sure you comment in the chat just a hi, where you're from, or feel free to comment throughout. I think last week we had a blast with everybody commenting in the chat. Yeah, I think we had a blast with that. I am going to say right before we start, if you're, I guess, internet connection or you can't hear us, can't see us, I think if you refresh your browser, that's the best solution that we've found. I'm at a public school, so I don't know what better internet I can get, but we'll see what happens. All right. Quick introductions, because I keep forgetting to do that for people who are just joining us. I'm Rosalie. I'm a board certified behavior analyst. I live in Colorado during the winter, and I go to Maine for 2 months in the summer. So that's my little tidbit for today. Katie, how about give yourself a quick introduction?
I am Katie Thomas. I'm also a board certified behavior analyst, and I coincidentally also go to Maine in the summer. That's something that Rosalie and I have in common that we didn't know about when we started working together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny. Awesome. I'm seeing a lot of people from Colorado and Boston, which I'm actually from Boston. So, all right, I'm going to share my screen and we will get started with our shared purpose matrix, just to bring some flexibility to this conversation. All right. I thought that was such a fitting picture.
Yeah.
It's totally how I feel when I'm looking at my data sometimes and being like, it's just not capturing what I want it to. All right. So we are going to start off with our first question, which is who or what is important to you when we're talking about our shared purpose today, which is, how do we present our complex data in a way that actually shows the growth that's happening? And I will jump right in and say clients are important to me in this situation, funders, our science is really important. I think another piece that's important to me is creativity, as well as kind of flexibility. All right, what do you got, Katie? What's important
to you? Like being able to show our programming is working.
Yeah. Show what's working. And Diane said caregivers for sure. Show what's working. Yeah, caregivers are extremely important. And I guess another huge one is just doing the best we can. I guess is another something that's important to me. All right, I'm already laughing because what yucky stuff gets in the way when we're thinking about complex data collection.
I laughed at myself in the car thinking about this one. It was like panic. It's just panic.
Panic shows up.
Sorry, I already have a needy dog and I just walked in the door, so.
I think everybody in here can be pretty flexible about having a dog on your lap if you need be. So I think panic sets in. I think sometimes I confuse myself. Like, which way do I want to do this? How is this going to best showcase this?
I was trying to think of like what the word would be for that, because like I was like my I can feel my circuits sometimes just kind of start to short circuit. Like, oh God, like which way am I supposed to go with this?
Yep, you get a little circuit. I think that's right though. The little short circuit that happens to me too, for sure. Yeah, overthinking, of course. And then I think sometimes I just kind of get a little bit like, all right, I don't know, ho-hum is really
Complacent.
yeah, thanks, complacent. Yep. All right. So there's a lot that shows up, and I'm very sure that we will have a chance to kind of talk some more about that as we go through. What behaviors will you see or hear me using to get relief from the yucky stuff? Everybody in here probably already knows I'm an over creator. A black screen with a crowd. Oh, Angela, I would just refresh your browser.
Yeah, it's a new one.
That is a new one for today. I will create the same program over and over and over again, kind of with different, measurement, strategies, different collection. I mean, like I will overdo it.
This is one where I totally match you. Like mine is that I start trying to capture every variable, and then all of a sudden I have a whole bunch of stuff that really means nothing.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's trying to capture, I guess, perfection. That's kind of where it goes for me. I think you'll also see me asking for help to get away from that confusion. I'll call Katie and be like, what am I doing wrong in this situation? All right. What behaviors will I see or hear you using to move towards what's important to this group when we're thinking about complex data collection? And I think you'll see me reaching out for help, which is both a helpful away from those emotions and towards kind of our shared purpose. Reaching for help. I think being willing to try. I think flexible. Thinking about other kind of avenues for data collection. Yeah, consider the ease of implementation. Yep, for sure. Katie, got anything?
No, I was laughing when you said reaching out for help because, well, clearly I've experienced a lot of this, and I kind of got myself stuck just being angry. And I thought you were crazy when you're like, I'm going to reach out to so and so. And we'll talk about it later. But it was like one of the coolest experiences, and it was unbelievably helpful. And I was so thankful to have you and your flexibility in that moment because I had zero.
Yeah, we'll chat about that in 1 second. I'm just going to say a quick circle in the middle. Do we all think we're going to have a chance to notice some of this stuff showing up as we go through this presentation? And I know that I will. All right, just going to do a quick run through of the noticing grid, our point of view within the happy medium approach. So you'll see down kind of the left side, we have our levels, which range in contextually appropriate behaviors. So a level 1 is just right, matching the environment. Level 2, you're starting to get a little too big and it's a little awkward. Level 3, you're definitely too big for the environment. Across the top, you have your noticing level. You have what other people see, which are our objective behaviors that we see when individuals utilize behaviors in the environment. We've got what other people will do, which is our proactive and reactive strategies that are in our behavior intervention plan. And then we have our how can I get back to a level 1, which is like our replacement behaviors. So if I use a funny example today, or not a funny, but a really actually serious example. So a level 1, if your dog dies, a level 1 behavior would be probably crying, looking for, somebody to console you, talking about it. Whereas maybe, if you spilled some milk, crying might be a level 2 behavior, or crying, hitting, screaming, yelling, property destruction would be what we would see in a level 3 behavior. So that's just a quick run through of the noticing grid, because you're going to see a lot of that in our data collection. As we do a lot with the noticing grid and the happy medium approach, and how we, show funders, families, and ourselves kind of what we're doing. So here comes, what'd you say, Katie?
I didn't say anything.
Okay. So here's our very special thanks to Faye. She works at HMSA out in Hawaii. She's a reviewer, and Katie and I were super stuck on some data collection stuff, and we kept getting back these like 3 months authorizations. And both of us were just like, what are we doing? Like, why aren't we showcasing this progress in a way that's helpful for these funders? So I was just like, I'm going to reach out and just ask if we can have a collaboration meeting and just present some hypothetical data collection. And I can't tell you how helpful that conversation was. So don't be afraid to reach out to funders for help. I know sometimes I get a little rule governed and I'm like, all insurance people are against us. They just don't want to give us authorization. But I think most of them are there to help when you ask in a way, that really creates that kind of collaborative relationship. Talk to families about data collection and even talk to the individual.
I was say,
Go ahead, Katie.
What was really awesome meeting with Faye too was I know when in the moment you and I were like, wow, we just got so much out of that. But then when you reached out to her to find out if we could give her a little shout out, and her response was like, I had so much fun geeking out on data with you guys. I'm like, yes, that's totally what we did. So it was really kind of cool to see there was a bit of like a mutual, piece to that. Sorry, the cat is pulling my laptop over now. Sorry.
Oh gosh, attention is really important in your house, isn't it?
Yeah, especially when I'm gone all day. Sorry.
I know. I hear you. That's what happens to me when I get home too. All right. So, and yeah, it was so fun to talk with Faye and geek out over, what works. But I think that's nice when you can I think it'd be more fun in our field. And I think our field would do better if researchers, practitioners, and then, the stakeholders, those funders, would really get together and pull together instead of kind of, I don't know, it's just like the silo problem in education, basically. Anyway, but reach out. So what are we looking for in data? Like what's the purpose of data? Like we don't just want data to have data, although sometimes when I do my overproducing, I do end up with data just to have data because I didn't get what I wanted. But we're looking for growth. We're looking for, is regression happening? I use data for some of my kind of more impacted individuals for some health purposes. Yeah, to show growth. We want to show that growth. I sometimes use data over long periods of time to track trauma history that potentially that individual can't talk to us about. And I'll show kind of how we use that a little bit later. Is our current programming working? We need to know that. Like, we don't just take data to have data. We need to know what we're doing is working. Do we need to make adjustments to our programming if we aren't making the progress we want? Do we have an adequate dose of treatment? What's our rate of acquisition, especially if you're working with early intervention learners? That's important, that rate of acquisition. Well, I guess it's important across the span, but I feel like it's just super important for those early intervention cases. Iterator reliability, would somebody else be able to come in and do what we're doing? Our responsibility to our science, to payers, and then ethics, of course. So the next piece, I just kind of thought about, like, what is the ultimate purpose? Like, the ultimate purpose of our data and our programming and our science is, did we help the individual? So if you haven't read Wolf's 1978 paper on social validity, please do. It's really a wonderful article, and just, it's interesting. It's so long ago, but it's still so true. So in that article, he talks about social significance as the goal, right? That's really and are our behavioral goals what society wants? And now that we've got kind of even more to our science, what's that individual's value, and what are we doing? And how socially appropriate are our procedures? What we're doing, is it going to be payoff in the end? And how satisfied was the family, or whoever your client might be, if it's a group home or whatnot? So the key takeaways, is that a number, like from the article, are a number of things in our culture are subjective, but we are super focused on objective. So, how do we pull in some data collection strategies that can support how our objective behavior shows growth in that individual or shows value to that individual or helps that individual meet their values? And then, how do we ask client and caregivers about what we've done and if they like it or not? I think that's a really important one. And I think some of Katie's new data collection has been really getting at that in a great way, which I forgot to put in here, but that's okay. We'll do it at another time.
I thought there was something
Um,
in here.
huh?
I thought I
Oh,
saw it in there. Maybe I'm
some of
missing what
it's
you're
in
saying.
there. No, I was talking about that rating scale for
Oh,
outside of, but I think we've talked about it a couple times.
I don't
Um,
have data points on it yet, really, that it has much on it. I've only done it for 2 months. I'm doing it once a month. So,
oh yeah, yeah, there were only 2 data points. That's exactly why I didn't. Okay. So, and then I mean, Wolf talks about this in 78. How can we validate our objective data with some subjective measures of satisfaction by the consumer? So, anyway, all right,
this
there are risks.
thinking about something that we were talking about. I feel like it's come up in the crowdcast before, but I think we talked about it in one of the workshops. You had been on one of those like community boards kind of with the like with our population of kiddos that we serve, where they're kind of talking about the things they like and they don't like. And something came up about stimming. Do you remember that conversation we were having?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so I definitely am on a couple of kind of neurodiversity Facebook groups and blogs and stuff like that. And yeah, the stimming for sure comes up a lot. What were you thinking about it in terms of data collection?
Well, I was just thinking about how, like, remember my comment about it was like, oh, and having that conversation with you kind of about that, it just made me think about how, like, I have things that I, like to do, that I like to have done, that have no significance to anybody else, but they're important to me. Like me making the bed, I was telling you, like, if I don't make the bed, like, even if it comes down to I didn't put the like throw pillows on, it will nag me for a while. Like, I really want to finish it, but like at the end of the day, does like, that's not important to me getting my date done, but it's still something that's kind of important to me. So just with what we were talking about, the article, it just kind of got me thinking about that sometimes the things that are important to us aren't important to our client, but also the other way around. The things that are important to them, might we have to kind of look at it that it might be important to them, even though it doesn't look like it has significance to us.
Yeah,
So
or society.
that's
Thanks for bringing that up.
determine what's socially significant, right? Like,
Yeah, and I think, Wolf even kind of brings up in that article, the power of language and words, right? So it'd be interesting today, if within kind of our field, if some people wouldn't say that, we're looking for kind of value for the individual rather than social significance.
yeah, I
What's
like that.
yeah, what's of value to that individual rather than right? Because I think a lot of the neurodiversity movement is about, recognizing people for who they are, their strengths and supporting them and moving towards what they want, not so much kind of what society as a whole wants.
Right.
Which, social significance, social validity, all of those would kind of point to that. So I don't know, that sounds like a very fun research topic for somebody if they want to kind of shift up. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Stimming really, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, there's so many behaviors that are, you know, if it interferes with I mean, that's why we have treatment for substance abuse. That's why we have treatment for mental health, because it impacts your ability to live a valued life, right? So, um, yeah, so it's important for us, I think, to really sit back and think about what's important to the individual as a whole when we're doing treatment. But even when you're thinking about data collection, especially if you got some of those, highly verbal individuals like Katie and I work with, ask them like, what do you want us to track that will show you how you're doing? I'm moving towards what's important to you. Like get their input. They've got thoughts on that stuff, or they really could care less. And I've got both ways.
Well,
Um,
one of my guys who I've been with now for a while, middle school now into high school, he never used to care. But now, 4 years later, when we talk about it, he's like, well, this is what's important to me. Like, so it's kind of cool to see how those values have grown with him as we've been working. So I've never stopped asking, and it really paid off.
yeah, totally. Like you got to throw that out there, right? And yeah, and we'll get into a total. I'm going to get in off a total side shoot here, but talking about kind of like assent for research and stuff like that. But like, man, we've got to make sure that our clients are willing participants in intervention, like, and that we're measuring and showing them the progress that they're making and they're feeling good about it. I know a lot of families that I've worked with over the years don't care to see graphs, but they really care about a little bit of a written report, or they really care about just having time for me to verbally tell them what's going on with programming. Like it's just not a, one-stop shop. Let me show you our data and graphs and you'll be happy. So just thinking about that as a helpful piece too. So we just talked about everything that I said in that, we want to, guide our procedures, their input. We want to empower clients to meet their values. So when does, I really want to go off in that rabbit hole, but I'm trying hard not to. That's why I'm so distracted. I'm like, no, shift your thinking, Rosalie. I'm also super stuck. If anybody has resources, I would really appreciate an email I'm super stuck on psychological safety in classrooms, particularly looking at teachers' behavior and how it supports psychological safety within the classroom. Anyway, if anybody has anything on that, I would love it. Now I'm going to shift my thinking back to what we were doing. So when does data get complicated? And this is just a running list. Everybody can kind of add to this list. I think the setting gets complicated. You've got, maybe you're treating across settings. Maybe you're at home, you're at school, you're in the community, you're in the clinic, you're in the bus. The setting can create some complications for data collection. Sometimes the topography of behavior changes, depending upon, who's around or where you are or whatnot. Especially as we move kind of to individuals who have a longer history, they're older, they've been in treatment for a long time, or those highly verbal guys, they have a long history. Sometimes that history works against us. And then relational framing ability, if they're operating on rule governed behavior instead of contingencies. We'll do, I was trying so hard, but yeah, we'll do, I think once I kind of pull something together, we'll do a crowdcast on the psychologically safe special education classroom or BD classroom or something like that. It's hot on my list right now. It's like burning a hole in my brain. I've got to get it figured out. So sometimes, I think we've talked about this a lot already, but like sometimes tons of data, it just totally like complicates things. Like it's a lot of data, but it isn't the right picture. Like you haven't painted the Monet that's actually like unfolding in front of you. But man, you've got like the paints, you've got everything right there. And then I think sometimes subjectiveness can make things complicated. I think the higher up on those skills, especially if you're starting to explore ACT, and I know I always come back to this, but like, how do you objectively define self as context? Diffusion's a little bit easier to kind of objectively define. But as you get into some of those, more kind of psychological flexibility processes, some things get a little bit more complicated just because you're measuring thoughts and emotions and things that you as the behavior analyst cannot always see. And it's a huge part of humans. So our first kind of set of kind of how do we make more complex skills, how do we kind of break them down one? And then how do we demonstrate that the individual is making progress or not making progress? That's going to inform us. So I kind of put together a couple of scenarios, and I saved my favorite for last, which is the subjective rating scale stuff, but we'll get through it, I promise. So the first set is kind of our objective behavior across all contexts versus a cold probe across individual contexts. And this one came directly from our conversation with Faye, because Katie and I were just spinning our wheels with this. Because we've got a lot of learners that have a lot of really complex skills, and we teach those skills individually, but then we chain those skills together because they all go together. If you don't notice an emotion showing up, you're not going to be able to label an emotion. So all of those skills end up going together in a chain to deploy together. But what do you want to do? You want to just show that they've mastered that. So here's kind of growth of individual intervals at a level 1. So remember, the level 1 is demonstrating contextually appropriate behaviors that match the environment. So here we just have, and you can see, we had a break in treatment and data collection, but that individual can demonstrate sustaining at a level 1 for 100% of intervals. That's great. Now, if we kind of start looking at cold probes across context, we see a pretty different picture. And Katie, you should probably talk since this is your data, but we see a pretty different picture when we do maintains a level 1 when being asked to shift our thinking. Maintains a level 1 when told no. Maintains a level 1 with siblings, which actually, Katie, I was shocked when I pulled this data that was the case with that.
Yeah, you know what it is? We're not having enough contact with siblings. So that actually, now seeing how well he's doing with all of the rule changes with me, we're going to increase sibling time, because I'm really surprised by that one too.
Yeah. So, so basically what Katie did after our conversation with Faye is she was like, oh, all right, like this is pretty important. I no longer need to look at like, oh, can this individual demonstrate that he can sustain a level 1? But now I need to see, where are the challenges with him sustaining a level 1? And I think once we get that more data points from mom and dad with that rating scale, we'll have even more information about this.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, this tied to also, it was like hard, like he was maintaining a level 1 in my sessions, but then there were other skills I was tracking that just had so much variability to them. And so it was really interesting once we started breaking this level 1 just kind of down into nittier, grittier scenarios. We started to see, oh, that's probably the variability in other things is coming from because of these individual, contexts here.
Yeah, right. Which, had we just kind of continued to be like, oh, he mastered a level 1, sometimes we'll keep that percentage of intervals at a level 1 going for a really big chunk of time, because you get a lot of historical information with that. Like, do we have a harder time when, school's about to start, or Christmas holidays, or whatever? But yeah, breaking this down supports Katie in arranging the environment to occasion more encounters for the skills that he needs to actually work on.
And so what was really cool too, when you pointed out the sibling stuff, we know this kiddo has a hard time with interpersonal relationships. So it was really eye-opening when there was nothing showing up in siblings, which immediately to me was like, I need to change something in my programming, because this isn't accurate. This is not the right picture. And so, like I said, we actually just this past week started upping his sibling contact during sessions, specifically in doing like group activities together versus just like interactions passing through the house and stuff. So it gave me a really good idea of where I could do something better for his programming too, which I was a little unanticipated little side piece I got.
Yeah. So breaking this out supported a ton of intervention information. So I think that it worked great for that. Now, if a funder looked at this, what might they say? Is a whole nother story. So let's kind of look at kind of the next next possibility, kind of, if my thing's going to load. So here's kind of, oh, I think I misordered this. I'm sorry. It did get totally jumbled a little bit. I wonder what happened. Anyway, no biggie. So this complex plan should be up above. So here is kind of, I'm going to just scroll down to the other data for a second so that, yeah, because look, oh, never mind. Sorry, I got lost. I told everybody this is going to be a little bit messy today because we've got so much going in here. So if we think about these complex chains of behavior, we can look at kind of frequency of single steps in the chain. So, how many steps in the chain did they actually complete? We can look at kind of percentage of all the steps in the chain, or we can look at kind of individual, did they complete the entire chain? We can look at a percentage of that. So I included, I'm glad. Thanks, Amy. So if we look at this complex chain of basically the overarching kind of skill program is communication. The individual increase their ability to communicate to support the reduction of undesirable behavior. So here's our huge list of skills that go into being able to communicate in order to support the reduction of those undesirable behaviors. And you can look, functional communication has 4 targets in it. Communicating for help has 1. Functional communication for compromise has 3 targets. Communicating before you get to a level 2 or 3 on the noticing grid has 1. Problem solving conversation, which you're going to see a little bit more of coming up, has 6 targets in it. Goal setting has 4. Reporting thoughts and body sensations 2. So all of this communication, there's so much of it. So we could go through kind of like what we did it before and say, okay, like individual, like mastered functional communication, amazing, right? That would be cool. That's great. We've showed that, but then how do we demonstrate that it's actually being used in a way that supports the individual? So here we've got a couple of different examples of how kind of chunking this out can look. So in the task analysis for having a problem-solving conversation, there's 7 total steps in that process. So in this graph, we just have, how many steps did that individual complete? And I don't know, I like this. It gives me it's pretty variable, at times, but we're kind of hovering at, we're kind of missing 2 steps. And I know for this individual, the 2 steps that we're missing are initiating the conversation and then initiating the plan at the end. Those are the 2 steps that are almost always missed. But I generally like this display for myself. And then during intervention, I can kind of write down, what were the missed steps or whatever that I'm going to provide more support around. But then here comes.
I have a question.
Go.
I told you this can be one of those where I ask a lot of questions more
Good.
than like and supporting. Have you ever done the percentage of the steps in the plan, and have you looked at do you prefer the frequency?
So I think because, I'm old and I'm set in my ways. When I was looking at some of yours yesterday with the percentage, I was like, I like the percentage, how the percentage kind of charts out in a better way. But
because I'm looking at the frequency and thinking I like the way the frequency charts out better.
Isn't that so funny? I think it depends, because I think because this is my individual client, and I work only directly with that individual, it's super easy for me to note like, oh, this was the step that we missed or whatnot. So I think the frequency feels good to me in that way. I think when I was looking at yours, it was feeling good from a supervisory standpoint. I don't know why, but we can all debate it. I think they both kind of look pretty good.
Because that's why a lot of times with these chains, I do so when I do the total chain, so what percentage of the chain are they doing? I do it as a percentage, but then when I go and do each step, I do frequency so I can see like which one are they using and which one are they not.
Yep. Yeah. And I think it's just the way that it supports your knowledge and how it informs your intervention, right? Like what
Yeah.
works best for one of us might not work best for another. You know, and I think for different clients too, for how they present, like this guy's pretty predictable in terms of what are going to be harder steps in this chain for him. Whereas some of our other learners are less predictable. So having that, you know, really chunked out data would be help, like we have here, which is kind of percentage of kind of each step. So, you know, what's the percentage of times that they're initiating the conversation about the problem? You know, state something out loud. I have a problem. I need to talk to you. I need some help in this area. Whatever it might be, you know, we're pretty hit or miss with that, right?
Yeah.
So we
He
need,
looked at me funny.
what'd you say?
He looked at me funny.
Yeah, yeah, right,
Like,
right.
oh, you have a problem. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah, I had a kid of that used to just like come next to me, and I knew that was kind of the, you know, I've got a problem because otherwise he wouldn't really want to be near me.
Right.
So that was my indication that I needed to prompt something. But you can see you get a lot of information from that graph alone, where you wouldn't get that information from just this total chain, the frequency of the steps in the chain. So if we keep going down, we've got, you know, identifies components of the problem. You know, that skill's on a much better kind of acquisition trajectory than, you know, than our initiates the conversation. Um, and then listening to the perspective of the therapist on the problem. We're pretty amazing at that, it looks like.
Yeah.
And Katie, you should be talking about this because this is your guy. But and again, this gives us so much information, right? Like next time when Katie goes in, she's not necessarily going to just kind of jump in and just run that chain, right? Like, let's do this. It looks like she needs to provide some additional support in our ability to provide potential solutions to problems. What are the rest of them? Whoa, we're pretty good about listening to the therapist's potential solutions.
I can't think of who this is off the top of my head, but it's clearly one of mine that doesn't like to come up with solutions on their own, but they're very yes, ma'am the rest of the time. I bet you I know who it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're also getting better at initiating the plan. So breaking out and taking kind of like how often are they doing this step correctly is super informative for intervention. Now, again, I'm not quite sure how a funder would feel. And I think when we met with Faye, this wasn't the best option for them. And yeah, Katie, keep asking questions, please.
Yeah.
You know, but looking at this, there's a lot of information that we can understand and can inform our intervention. We can make changes. You know, we're getting a little bit better with creating a plan with the solutions, but we're doing great once we have a plan. That's great. We're seeing a lot of acquisition here. That if we did, here's kind of the total percentage of how many times, or of the entire task that they're deploying. Why am I losing my words right now? So, you know, if we're looking at this graph is a much better graph for a funder to understand. Are they? Go ahead, Katie.
Well, I was going to say at the flip side of that, I feel like this graph is what I had been presenting to funders, and I was getting a lot of questions about variability. So then when I was able to chunk out this problem solving skill into all those steps, I was able to say to them, hey, we're still working on this part of problem solving, but like look at the progress we're making on this part of it. So it gave them, I had to put some explanation into it. I couldn't just throw the graphs at them, but they were really able to see, hey, the variability on this total task, it's not because we're not making progress.
Yep. Well, and I still disagree that this is a highly variable graph. However,
that could be another crowdcast.
That will be another crowdcast. But yeah, so it allowed Katie to provide the information. Like we're still not submitting, all of these graphs to funders, right? We're submitting kind of this graph, but we have the information that we can give to them on like why this is a little bit variable. And I guess I also might just be, I think I'm desensitized to variability because I work with those highly verbal guys that are sometimes under direct contingencies, sometimes under rules, so there's variability in their responding, and it's up to me to take data in ways like Katie did here that inform my intervention. Because man, if I just had, this one, if I just had one, like graph like this that, they initiate and I kind of quit programming because this was so variable, I would have missed all of this stuff that was pretty phenomenal. So anyway.
Yeah, and I get what's really cool about it is now the ability, like you said, like some of these graphs you don't want to show to funders because they see variability where we maybe don't see variability, but to be able then to chunk it out like I did and maybe put a blurb with the graph of like, hey, here's how this is going, knowing that that blurb is an interpretation of my graph, so I'm not showing you. And then if for some reason you really want to see it, I have the data to support my interpretation of what's going on. So it just is, it's morphed into this different type of like graph reading than I was trained on doing. It's just like you read the graph and it's either going up, it's going down, it's variable. But to be able to look at it kind of in a deeper sense like that and really write about it and talk about it has been really cool. This cool little addition to treatment planning now.
Yeah. And I think it feels better to me too. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
yeah. So that's one way that we've broken down kind of very complex skills that require you to chain them together at some point in time. Because it's great if you can have that individual kind of independently master skills, but then the real kind of, I guess I see it, the real value to them is when they can use them together when they need to, all together in that chain of behaviors that helps them to be successful. Katie, did you have final thoughts on those chaining things? We worked for so long on those. I'm like, I feel like I could talk about those for like 6 hours with how
I'm really excited that I was able to talk about them today with a smile on my face and like genuinely feel really good about them finally. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Like this.
Yeah. So there's multiple ways to kind of, visually display, to take data. And those are just the ways that we've really been finding are super beneficial for those complex behaviors that then turn into complex chains of behavior that you've got to work on. So this next section is about using kind of objective but subjective rating scales to support your undesirable behavior data. Because I think a lot of times, and I was talking to somebody in Hanley's group about this, because it's so challenging when you're working to reduce these really high level behaviors. Sometimes your chart doesn't look like what it feels like. And there's things that are happening alongside, like the magnitude of the behaviors changing a little bit, or man, did you see on that Halloween party day that kid did amazing. Last year that would have been like a 6-hour meltdown. So sometimes our data doesn't capture what's occurring in the environment that actually is making that that task harder, or that day harder, or whatever might be occurring in the environment that does then have a direct effect on our undesirable behavior data, right? Like if there's an unexpected fire drill at school and your kiddo is still super averse to loud noises, it's highly likely that you're going to have a bigger behavior day on that day. And you can always kind of circle that data point on your chart and say this was our outlier because of a fire drill. But we can't kind of change our kind of data collection for every changing context. we can't change it just because kind of, magnitude goes down a little. Like we would be changing it all the time, and then we wouldn't have anything to really like look at. So, some different ways, and I just included these, a couple of kind of behavior data sets or graphs so that you guys could look at. And I wanted to talk quickly while we're right here. And I'm sorry I gave a big introduction, and then I'm going to kind of do a little side note. This is one of our data tracking for trauma responses. So you can look at both of these graphs, and you can see a pretty big uptick in behaviors kind of starting in October, November. And that's actually when this little human was removed from his birth family. So across multiple graphs, we've got very similar trends during that kind of last couple of weeks of October, early November. And this just informs our ability to manage the environment for him in different ways than if we didn't have that information. So, and you can see it kind of in all three. You can also see that starting school is a challenging time, going from summertime fun to no demands. Okay. So, a couple of different, I'm not going to use this example, but we also use it for other nonverbal individuals. We'll take even when we have periods of zero behavior, we keep that chart and that program in place because sometimes we actually get indicated to health concerns because we have a big uptick in behavior. So those are just two ways that we do that. Katie, you're texting me about clients.
It made me think of something not related. Sorry.
Yeah, no, Katie, you're absolutely right. I just deployed Katie on a case because people were thinking that the people that in place were magic and that it wasn't the programming. So we sent Katie out, who is a brand new person, and everything's going really well because she's using the same plan. I'm not magic. Eli's not magic. So, and yes, Katie, I think that's very true. It's a historic time of year for this individual to have challenging times with interpersonal relationships. And that's what those charts tell us. It's a big trauma.
I realized it's October, November, and you sent me out. I was like, oh.
Yeah, sorry. I guess I set you right up for that one. All right. So we've got kind of our, a couple of different, like contextual rating scales that I pair a lot with that undesirable behavior data. You can pair it with desirable, skills for acquisition, stuff like that. So this is one where you think about the demands and then you create, objective tiers. So, did we have 5 demands in this session? Did we have 6 to 8 or more, especially when you're working on distress tolerance? Having how many demands were placed and knowing what that data looks like can be super helpful, and it can help you inform your intervention about your distress tolerance. So, whoa, look at that. Oh my gosh. We had a day where we had 8 demands, and look, like our tantrum duration stayed at like 0. How cool is that? Like that's a huge moment to celebrate. So you've got kind of 3 pieces of information there. You've got your undesirable behavior, you've got your demand rating, and then you're also, I would hope that you're taking data on, distress tolerance to direct demands. I think most people should know at this point, I'm not really a big fan of like, compliance-based ABA but there are at times where we need individuals to be able to follow a direct instruction. School is full of direct instructions, direct demands, transition now, eat your lunch now, get your pencil out. Those are all demands. Katie and I have been harping on the questions the questions where you offer kids choices. Would you like to do a sort of non-preferred, a highly non-preferred, or something you totally hate type of situation? So being able to look at how many demands are being placed on that individual along with your skill acquisition and your behavior reduction can be super helpful. The next one is kind of unexpected environmental events. I bet we've all worked with individuals on the spectrum or not who have a hard time when things are unexpected. You know, if there's a substitute teacher, you know, if it's raining and they thought it was supposed to be a sunny day, you know, they check the weather and it said sunny. That happens in Colorado often. So giving some type of rating, and these have to be individually defined for the individual. You know, you might be able to get away with kind of like 0 to 1 unexpecteds, 2 to 4 unexpecteds, but you've got to really observe that individual and decide what are the ratings that do make a difference on their behavior or that we would like to see be better. You know, so like it's Katie and I'll conference every once in a while on something, and I'm like, whoa, did you count, like, you know, mom's sick, you know, we didn't, you know, we didn't sleep well, the dog came in and woke us up, there was a sub in math, you know,
Yeah.
somebody threw something at us, you know, there's 5 unexpected environmental events, you know, and then you're like, oh, no wonder that kid's at a 2 right now. um so being able, and again, with this, you've got your, you know, undesirable behavior, you've got your rating scale that's pretty subjective, and then you've got your tolerance to unexpected environmental events, all of which can, all of those graphs together can really inform your intervention in a pretty neat way. And then I didn't put in here kind of the ABC Skill Access is a program within the Happy Medium approach that helps us to rank or objectively define when individuals show up differently based on an entire day or even moment to moment. So like A skill access is like they're rocking it, like they're accessing, you know, they're communicating back and forth. It's individually defined. A B day is kind of like, they're not so engaged, having a harder time following directions, you know, they're not engaging in preferred activities. And the C day, you're like, ooh, I'm going to just sit here and hang out until you come chat with me. You need a little space. So again, these are individually defined. You might decide to run this on a interval because you've got a kiddo that fluctuates throughout the day. Or you might be able to kind of have a kiddo who just either shows up and they're an A, B, or a C skill access for the entire day. Katie, what do you see most? I think I see most the variable kiddos throughout the day.
Yeah, I was just actually just thinking about that. I see a lot of the kids that are variable, but the ones I'm seeing direct, I'm trying to kind of distinguish two. I have a couple of them that don't, that kind of are all A day, and you don't really realize they're having a B day until like one, you see the one thing that you're like, oh, the whole day has been bad. But I can't, I'm trying to think of what distinguishes those guys from the variable guys, and I'm not really coming up with anything.
Yeah, I
For
think.
me, they're all older. That would be the one thing.
Mm,
Um,
yeah, and
so
there might be.
maybe feeling a little bit more like they're supposed to hold it together.
Yeah,
Both of them have that kind of personality where they want to please. They kind of know what the expectations are. They have a hard time meeting them though. So
yep,
they do present like A's most of the time. And then all of a sudden you're like, something happens. And you're like, well, we're not having an A day. And that all was just not happen. Like, that's not where we were.
oh yeah, I call them those are the fake it till the make it guys, and that,
Yeah. That's
yeah,
what I love.
yeah, those guys I always do total, like for the whole session. I'm like, was this an A, B, or
Mhm.
a? Because it automatically, as soon as I see those objective behaviors in that B occur, I'm like, oh, there we go. It was a B day.
Yeah. It's not that it was a shift from an A to a B. It was
Yeah,
like we were B the whole time and we just weren't showing it.
yeah, yeah. I
They tend
didn't.
to be that don't have red level behaviors. So they don't have unsafe behaviors. They really go more between a green and a yellow.
Yep,
I guess would be a big thing for me with those guys.
yep. Yeah, and I think some of them are further along in treatment. You know, like I think
Yeah.
for a couple of guys at the beginning of treatment, I would have had this interval at like 15 minutes. And then now, kind of as we've progressed and we don't have a level 3 or a red, you'll hear Katie use green, yellow, red. Her and Anne work together a lot, and a lot of their guys like the green, yellow, red, and a lot of my guys like the 1, 2, 3. It's Northern Colorado, Southern Colorado. I don't know. We're like divided by our colors. Who knows? Colors and numbers. You know, but for a couple of our guys that don't have kind of that high level 3 anymore. They fluctuate between that 1 and 2, which is what we want, ultimately for them, so that they can match their environment and meet the things that are important to them. Initially in treatment, I might have had the interval set at 15 minutes. And then as they're developing skills, reducing those level 3 behaviors, then we're coming in with, oh, maybe we only need this check-in kind of halfway through the day and at the end of the day. And then maybe we only need, one. But tracking this ABC skill access has been so beneficial within the education setting, helping teachers understand, like, whoa, look, like we didn't place a lot of demands today, and we had low behavior, but it's because of our rating on this ABC skill act. They were having a C day, so we didn't put any demands on them. So I guess overall it paints this picture of like, oh yeah, great. Like we had low behavior, low demands, but it isn't time to increase demands because it was a C access day. So it really supports our understanding of kind of why that undesirable behavior data looked like that, the environmental conditions that resulted in that data point, or objective behaviors observed from the individual. Next,
I'm going to jump in and let you know that we have like 4 minutes left. And just remember, I have that phone call. I'm going to jump off right away. So if you want to get to that last one, I probably won't be able to talk.
I'm going to put the, okay, let's hurry up. All right.
You just have to take the lead on that one.
So, Matt. Okay, yeah, go ahead. Whatever works.
No.
We will be all okay if you just leave us. I'm hopeful. I was a little worried when you weren't, here earlier, but anyway.
Well, it's the last one is the one that you wanted me to talk about. So I'm saying I might be able to talk about it because I'll have to jump off. So I'll just let you do it.
No. Go. You go right now.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I'm going to scroll.
So this one's really cool. This is, I have a kiddo I work with who, like, his biggest issue is like problem solving stuff. And I just had my gears, like, I just spinning my wheels trying to figure out how do I really capture his ability to problem solve and to, I can't think of what I'm trying to say here. But so we're just doing a lot of talking about our problems. And so what Rosalie suggested I do is to just make permanent products. So we basically will work through a matrix. Sometimes I do it like I have it out and we type through it, but other times we just have conversations about stuff that's going on that's kind of significant to him in the moment. And I just make sure as we're talking about it that I'm circling through a matrix, and I'll pop it into one later so that I have a permanent product of all the things that came up. And so what I think is really cool looking at this is back when I started, one of the first ones in April of this year. The uncomfortable emotions and thoughts that come up are kind of all physical. He's got stressed, he's got worried, and then kind of jumping up to, what moves he's going to make towards things that are important to him. They're pretty basic. I'm going to talk to my teacher. I'm going to, email and communicate. I'll make a plan. But then if we jump down to the one where I think we just did this one last week, you can kind of see how his understanding and thinking about these problems is getting a little bit more in depth. His emotions now, he's using, what was he using before? Like stress. Like now I was feeling disrespected. I was feeling confusion, worry. And I think one of his was he's worried that people aren't seeing the good in him. So just our understanding of the emotions that he's having. I'm really proud of him because up towards, things that he can do to move towards things that are important to him, he's really getting more specific plans. What was the one that made me laugh? Because he's always like, I'm going to think about how I can work on being more comfortable being uncomfortable, Katie. I'm like, I love it. But then he even was like, he's like, I need to learn to listen even when I don't like what people are saying. And it's like, oh my gosh, yes. Because he's the kid that, as he has a problem and you would help him come up with a solution, he would, but well, let this never was, or that over kind of button into, productive solutions that are moving him towards things that are important to him, I think is really cool. And then the other thing I love about his is the things that are important to him have stayed relatively stable. They've
Yeah.
grown and they kind of change and they morph, but like that sense of independence and responsibility and family are just consistent across the board. So it's really fun to see. He has a hard time identifying like him and who he is. So to go through these with him every once in a while and be like, hey, these that keep coming up over and over and over again. There are a lot of things that are important to you who make you who you are, and you know what it is. It's here every week. You just kind of have to see it, and so it's fun having this. And he likes walking through them too.
Yeah, I think the Matrix has been one of my favorite ways to, and I know you got to go, Katie, so go ahead.
I'm just gonna wait for them to call and then I'll hop off. So
okay. Yeah, I think one of my favorite, the Matrix is by far right now, when you get to these kind of complex skills, it's one of my favorite permanent product things I think I've ever done. Um, it's incredible to watch the complexity grow, like their ability to notice
right,
emotion showing up, their ability to start to decipher, like, oh, like, whoa, an emotion showing up and I'm trying to move away from it, versus, whoa, like, I have an emotion showing up but I'm persisting, and here's how I'm moving towards what I really care about right now. It's really fascinating to see, and it's phenomenal, like, and I would never be able to catch that complexity of skill development in a line graph. I mean, I guess maybe if I
oh
coded, but I
yeah,
don't
and
think
that's the
so.
thing I loved about his new Matrix. He was like, well, one of the things I did to get relief from emotions is I went into the car and I just started saying, and he told me every single like mean word he said. It was hysterical. He's like, can I say them? I was like, yes, you can. And it was like I couldn't have done this without the Matrix to be like, hey, buddy, you're right. That doesn't really move you towards something of, like a value of yours. But in the past, you would have just yelled at that person, like to their face. So the fact that you had, enough composure to pause, to go to your car, and to yell all these bad things, like I would call that a workable way. And I don't think I could have captured that and been able to provide reinforcement for that behavior without a Matrix. Like there's just no way.
Yeah, yeah. I'm surprised that we saved this for last, because this might be one of my favorite ways for complex behaviors. It encompasses all living, right, and flexibility on there.
Yeah.
Um, so, and people can kind of read through kind of the magnitude rating scales. There's a lot of information on there, in terms of, thinking about, what were the kind of magnitude of, maladaptive behavior, undesirable behavior. Wow, I haven't said that in a long time. Thinking about kind of what is the disruptions, what's the magnitude of the disruption in the environment that leads to kind of reduced attending, because we're distracted by whatever's going on, like Katie's dog or whatever. Um, and then, oh, is it going to load? There we go. And then, kind of what was the magnitude of my prompts? Like, I can take, oh, I used a physical prompt. Oh, I can take a frequency of prompts that I use in order to occasion a skill. But when you have this rating scale next to your behavior data or your skill acquisition data, it just supports that bigger, brighter picture. Like you're really painting what's going on. Like, oh yeah, look at that. Like our attending, scale was really low, but our prompt was really high. What do we need to do here? It's just some more information for your intervention. And so I did a level of attending graph so that people could kind of see. Then you can match it up with your undesirable behavior data. Up, is it going to load? And you've got a lot more information. And these are actually even low undesirable behavior. Oh, that's why I said it, because it's on the chart. So anyway, those are just some ways that you can gain more information and kind of use for complex data collection, it can get super complex super fast. So anyway, thanks for joining us today. And I'll keep everybody updated when we're going to do something about psychological safety in classrooms. And if you do have information on that, please, please, please send it my way. Feel free to, I'm going to quickly answer this question. Nope, there are no code words. You guys are on kind of your integrity. So make sure that you have participated. You've put something in the chat, said who you, hi, and where you're from, and then you're filling out the CEU form, and you should be emailed a pretty certificate. Thanks for everybody for being flexible last week when I made a mistake on that. If there's a mistake on this one, I promise you I will get it corrected and sent back out. So yeah, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys next week.